Beep, 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 beep. God, I have a frog in my throat. How are we? How are we? Okay, straight in now. Come on, subscribe. Please subscribe to my channel. All right, just subscribe. Buy me a coffee. Do the usual. Okay, so I thought we'd continue in the same vein as my previous video and consider a previous occurrence in regards to the Endocrine Society. You remember in my previous video that I mentioned to you that the group of 21 global hormone botherers had got together and said, oi, this article in WSJ Opinion is cobblers, and that the Endocrine Society are full of it, and that they've done a systematic review of all the studies in the field and found it wanting. I.e., that the idea of gender medicine is a nonsense, transition is iatrogenic, all the stuff that we've been saying, and you don't exactly need a huge systematic review to know, but you do to prove, right? Okay? We should never have been on the back foot like that. You should never have to prove that you shouldn't medicalise children, you shouldn't sterilise children, and you shouldn't experiment on children, especially when they're gay and autistic. How did that ever happen? Like I said at the end of my last video, you know? Warrior teachers will be fighting this, making sure it never happens again for the rest of their lives. Okay, so we've got another article that comes with this particular idea, or these particular doings that are going on, so I'll get straight into it now. The Endocrine Society's Dangerous Transgender Politicisation, which is from June 28th, 2023, so it's only a couple of weeks ago, so we're seeing things moving quite quickly. And this was written by Roy Eapen and Ian Kingsbury, and members we spoke with of the Endocrine Society take exception to the group's guidelines on gender-affirming care. This sounds to me like the nascent movements that led to the letter I explained about and that you were able then to go and read in my previous witterings. Okay, so a federal court last week, that would have been in March, so bear that in mind, struck down an Arkansas law banning the provision of sex change procedures, off-label puberty blockers, opposite-sex hormones and surgery to minors. So in other words, they'd got it to the federal court and said, you know, we want to stop this, so we banned it. They banned transition for minors, banned it for everybody in my book, but banned it for minors. And the court said, nope, not having it. Right? So, in that ruling, Judge James M. Moody Jr., Judge Moody, isn't that fantastic? Moody by name, have to wonder, don't you? Right. Moody Jr. repeatedly cited the Endocrine Society, the professional organisation of physicians who specialise in hormones. He wrote that the society has published widely accepted clinical practice guidelines for the treatment of gender dysphoria that were developed by experts in the field and are recognised as best practice. Right, so to sum up, law passed at a local level, went to federal court. The federal court said, no, we've read the Endocrine Society. It's absolutely as it should be. It's recognised best practice. You're not banning this for minors. Even though we know that would you rather have a trans child or a dead child? It's that part, it's that mantra in it, that sort of, low resolution, high altitude mantra that they live by. So that was that, right? And then the federal court said, no, you're not banning it. We're going to carry on doing it. And that was the statement that the judge made. Widely accepted clinical practice, recognised as best practice. In truth, this is continuing the article, over the past decade, transgender activists have co-opted the Endocrine Society and other professional organisations to promote such treatments for adolescents and even young children. Bringing this back to us in the UK for a bit, this is Heartland and his crew, the kind of nonsense they're up to. Going into medical schools and perverting medical education. Back to the article. The guidelines that were being pushed by the Endocrine Society and other organisations are based on flimsy evidence, giving the appearance that invasive and irreversible treatments are beneficial for young patients, despite a growing body of evidence to the contrary. The guidelines that had been used by lawmakers in states such as California and New York to endanger children, and now by judges to block state efforts at protecting youngsters. Everything based on this false premise, this false idea of a thing called a gender identity, which is actually your personality. A few days before Judge Moody's ruling, we attended the annual meeting of the Endocrine Society, of which one of us, Dr. Eapen, I love it, we've got a judge called Moody and a doctor called E-Pen. You could make this up. I used to have a biology teacher called Mr. Plant. We find that endocrinologists are aware of the society's failings and rue its elevation of transgender activism over medical expertise and patient need. Do you get that? Transgender activism. That's what's the same what it is. Over medical expertise and patient needs. What they are in fact catering to is patient wants. Often, in the case of older men, the titty skittles, in order they can grow their own moobs and then do vile things with them. Floppity flop. Right? Okay? The Endocrine Society endorsed medical transition for young people in 2017. It's also new, isn't it? It published the clinical practice guidelines for the treatment of gender dysphoric, gender incongruent persons. It's all gobblers, right? That Judge Moody cited. So he cited this nonsense research. At the time, there was little good research on this issue, and the Endocrine Society admitted the guidelines were largely based on evidence of low or very low quality. Let's mutilate children. Let's confuse them. Let's destroy their bodies. Let's give them no sexual function. And let's keep doing it, even though we, as a body that is supposed to represent an entire profession, know that the evidence is low or very low for it actually being of use. It's horrendous. It's medical malpractice. Jail. It's jail time. Jail time. The society, nonetheless, despite knowing that, recommended that some children receive a hormone regimen that will suppress the body's sex hormone secretion, determined at birth and manifested at puberty. Oh, we know there's no evidence. So we're not going to do it then. No, we're going to do it. Imagine being on that conversation. So the evidence is low or low quality. In fact, there isn't much evidence at all, is there? No, not really. So what are you going to do? Let's go cut up a few kids. It would take righteous cause mentality and narcissistic compassion to allow yourself to be in a position where you would know there was no evidence, but you'd go ahead anyway, because you're not doing it because this is something that has been proven. You are doing it because this is something that is morally right. Ideological capture there at the heart of this particular story. At this year's meeting, we had frank and fruitful discussions with endocrinologists who provide hormone treatments to kids with gender dysphoria, as well as some who don't. Without exception, they acknowledge that the society's evidence base for paediatric gender transition is weak at best. Yet while they're aware of the guidelines and shortcomings, they're afraid to voice their concerns. They're continuing to do this crap to children because they are frightened to tell other adults it's a medical scandal. And an unbelievable evidence of the weakness of us as individuals. The weakness and the failure of us as societies to recognise that when somebody says something that goes against the grain, you don't lambast them for it, you look and see whether what they're saying is right. Unbelievable. And they said there, that's without exception, everybody they spoke to. The Society's full-throated endorsement of gender-affirming care implied condemnation of anyone who holds differing views, the ideological taint of heresy and blasphemy. Blasphemer! All I said was this piece of fish was good enough for Jehovah. Pure life of Brian. Pure life of Brian. So medical professionals are being cowed into silence and coerced into providing treatments they know are dangerous to children. How do they sleep at night? How do they sleep at night? Same as the rest of them, I suppose. Perhaps the most telling interactions were with European endocrinologists who were there to discuss the latest research and treatments in that speciality. Those we spoke with expressed surprise that the US hasn't banned, or at least severely restricted, such treatments for adolescents and children. England, Sweden and Finland have all taken this path, and Norway is likely to follow. Belgium, France, Ireland and Italy are also raising concerns. These countries are following the science, which shows that the claimed benefits of hormonal intervention for young people fail to outweigh the risks. Firstly, do no harm. Most disturbing, endocrinologists on all sides of this debate told us that practitioners aren't complying with the precautions set forth in the Society's guidelines. Despite the document's call for careful mental health screening and its acknowledgement that most cases of childhood gender dysphoria naturally resolve during puberty, most endocrinologists recognise that some of their peers are rushing young patients to irreversible hormonal treatments. Every endocrinologist we spoke to, or spoke with rather, supports doing more to ensure that these guardrails are enforced, and many favour erecting new ones. Judge Moody's ruling cites the Endocrine Society's guidelines in a lengthy section titled Finding of Fact, which is essentially a recitation of transgender ideology the judge captured. A trial judge's finding of fact are all but unreviewable on appeal. Transgender ideology treated as fact, embedded at the highest levels of the legal system, and therefore becoming unassailable. Can you see what it is yet, kids? By allowing ideologues to hijack their organisation, endocrinologists, and by the sign of it, judges, are making themselves complicit in a scientifically baseless movement. I was probably right the first time when I scientifically baseless movement that inflicts serious harm on children's physical and mental health. Whatever happens from this point forward, it is fairly obvious to me that we as societies, in what we like to term the civilized world, are going to have to come up with some guidelines that say that there must be a proven benefit in the highest order, before this type of experimentation on human bodies is ever allowed to take place again. What we are seeing is an unfolding scandal the size of the eugenics scandal. The eugenics movement, which was a disgusting movement in the early part and middle part of the 20th century. That's what we are seeing. And I will just repeat what I always say, because I'm a boring old toad. It ends across the board, it ends now, and it never returns. That's the stance that governments should take. Transition surgeries that alter that alter surgically the genitalia or the breasts are genital mutilation. They come under the same banner as FGM. They should be banned, they should be made criminal, and it should end for everybody. The provision of hormones should be only for necessary medical treatments that are physical and not for the wishes of an individual who may wish to just grow man boobs that he can play with. It all ends. It's the only way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Hormone botherers. Have fun. I'll see you later.